Hello, and welcome back to our enlightening journey through the universe's new energy equation. I'm your host, Bella, and I'm thrilled you've joined us for this exciting third episode of this series. In our last episode, we dove into the origins of the new energy equation and explored Brandon's multidisciplinary approach. We discovered how years of his in-depth study across various fields culminated in this groundbreaking theory. Today, we're delving into an aspect of the energy equation that is both fascinating and, to some, quite mysterious: consciousness. Yes, you heard me right. We're talking about the human mind, awareness, and how it all connects to the energies of the universe. Imagine the possibilities when we start to consider our own thoughts and awareness as not just byproducts, but as integral components of the energy equation. We'll be looking at how consciousness is defined, how it's included as a parameter in the energy equation, and the methods scientists are exploring to measure it. And, of course, we'll examine the implications and challenges of adding consciousness into the scientific mix. By the end of this episode, we'll have a deeper understanding of how consciousness plays a role in the grand cosmic symphony. And as always, I promise there will be plenty of aha moments. So, grab your thinking caps, and let's dive headfirst into the alluring depths of consciousness and the new energy equation. All right, before we dive into how consciousness fits into the energy equation, let's first understand what we mean by consciousness. The term has been analyzed and redefined by various fields like psychology, neuroscience, and philosophy. Generally, consciousness refers to our awareness of our surroundings, our thoughts, emotions, and experiences. But let's break it down further. Starting with psychology, Sigmund Freud, one of the founding fathers of psychoanalysis, divided consciousness into three levels: the conscious, the preconscious, and the unconscious. According to Freud, the conscious mind contains everything we are aware of at a given moment. The preconscious includes memories and information that we can easily retrieve, and the unconscious holds our deepest desires and fears. Now let's jump over to neuroscience. Here, consciousness is often viewed from a biological perspective. Neuroscientists study the brain and nervous system to understand how neural activity leads to awareness and perception. Some neuroscientists, like Giulio Tononi, propose theories like integrated information theory, suggesting that consciousness arises from the way information is processed and integrated in the brain. Last, but certainly not least, we have philosophy. For centuries, philosophers have grappled with questions about the nature of consciousness. Is it merely a product of the brain or something more? Does it have a fundamental existence separate from the physical body? René Descartes, for example, famously said, "Cogito ergo sum," I think, therefore I am. He believed that the mere act of doubting one's existence served as proof of the reality of one's own mind. So, as we can see, consciousness is multifaceted and can be viewed from different lenses: psychological, neurological, and philosophical. Now, keeping these definitions in mind, let's explore how consciousness comes into play in the new energy equation. What could it mean for our understanding of not just ourselves, but the universe as a whole? Let's hone in on how it is conceptualized within the energy equation. In the energy equation, consciousness is not just about awareness or mental processes. It's considered as an integral part of the universe and a form of information and energy that has tangible effects on the physical world. Brandon Christopher King, the researcher behind this equation, proposes that consciousness is a fundamental force, akin to gravity or electromagnetism. Just like how gravity pulls matter together, consciousness can have an influence on the informational and energetic properties of the universe. Brandon's concept of consciousness in the energy equation is more aligned with certain philosophical and spiritual perspectives that see consciousness as universal and fundamental. He talks about consciousness being interconnected across different scales, from the micro to the macro. From the tiniest particles to vast galaxies, consciousness is believed to play a role in the flow and interaction of energy. Interestingly, this isn't just an abstract concept. Brandon's energy equation actually incorporates consciousness as a quantifiable parameter, Through complex mathematical formulations, the energy equation aims to model how consciousness interacts with and influences other forms of information and energy. So, in a nutshell, in the context of the energy equation, consciousness is not just a state of awareness or a product of brain activity. It's a fundamental force, a form of information and energy that's interconnected with the very fabric of the universe. This novel approach prompts us to re-examine how we think about consciousness and opens up exciting possibilities for understanding its role in the cosmos. We've talked about how consciousness is seen as a fundamental force in the energy equation. Now let's dive into the specifics of how it's actually incorporated into the equation itself. The energy equation is a mathematical model which seeks to describe the flow of information and energy in the universe, and consciousness is one of its key parameters. But what does it mean to say that consciousness is a parameter in a mathematical equation? Well, let's break it down. In the energy equation, consciousness is represented as a variable. Let's call it C. This variable accounts for the informational and energetic properties associated with consciousness. Brandon proposes that consciousness can be quantified in terms of information and energy. It's like measuring the force of gravity or the charge of an electron, but with different units and concepts. For example, think about the awareness you have of your surroundings, or the way your intentions can sometimes seem to influence events. According to Brandon, these aspects of consciousness can be measured and inserted into the equation as C. But how does C interact with other elements in the energy equation? The energy equation involves various other parameters that represent physical matter, energy, and other forms of information. C interacts with these parameters, influencing and being influenced by them. The really exciting part is that by adjusting the value of C and observing how it affects the overall outcomes predicted by the energy equation, we might start to understand how consciousness interacts with the physical world in a quantifiable way. This could potentially revolutionize fields like neuroscience, physics, and psychology, providing a mathematical framework for exploring consciousness. What we're looking at here is an unprecedented integration of consciousness into the physical models of the universe. It's really groundbreaking stuff and could pave the way for some remarkable discoveries. Before we dive into the implications of including consciousness in the energy equation, let's talk about the motivation behind this inclusion. Why did Brandon, the creator of the energy equation, believe it was so crucial to include consciousness? As we discussed earlier, Brandon is a multifaceted researcher who has dedicated years to studying different fields. His background in mental health was a pivotal factor in his interest in consciousness. You see, Brandon recognized that traditional physics, while incredibly successful in explaining the material world, has often struggled to account for phenomena like consciousness. Traditional physics generally deals with objective measurements like mass, energy, and charge. Consciousness, on the other hand, seems to be subjective and elusive, making it difficult to integrate into conventional physical models. Brandon realized that by ignoring consciousness, we might be missing a critical piece of the puzzle in understanding the universe. Think about phenomena like collective consciousness, intuitive insights, or even the placebo effect. These are instances where consciousness seems to have a tangible impact on reality. Brandon believed that if consciousness is having these effects, it must be exerting some form of information or energy that can be modeled. So he decided to develop an energy equation that includes consciousness as a fundamental parameter. His goal was to create a model that not only accounted for the material world, but also the immaterial aspects of reality that are interwoven with consciousness. By including consciousness, the energy equation becomes a bridge between the physical and the mental, the objective and the subjective. And this bridge has the potential to bring forth a more holistic understanding of our interconnected universe. Now that we understand why consciousness was included, let's move on to the implications and how this new perspective can change the way we approach science and reality. We've learned why consciousness is such an essential part of the energy equation. But here's a million-dollar question. How do we measure consciousness? There are a number of methods currently used by scientists and researchers to study and measure consciousness. First, let's talk about the neuroscientific approaches. One common method is using electroencephalography, or EEG. EEG records electrical activity in the brain, and researchers often use it to study states of consciousness, like wakefulness, sleep, and various altered states. Another powerful tool is functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI. fMRI measures brain activity by detecting changes associated with blood flow. This technique allows researchers to map which brain areas are involved in different cognitive processes. Moving from the lab to philosophy, some researchers adopt a more conceptual approach. Philosophers have grappled with the nature of consciousness for centuries, and their insights often shape how scientists think about and approach consciousness. But here's the kicker: measuring consciousness is extremely challenging. That's because consciousness is inherently subjective. My experience of the color red might not be the same as yours. Even if we can measure brain activity, how do we know what someone is actually experiencing? This brings us to what's known as the hard problem of consciousness. It refers to the challenge of explaining why and how we have subjective experiences. While we can observe the physical processes in the brain, we still don't have a clear understanding of how these processes give rise to subjective experiences. Moreover, consciousness is not just an on-off switch. There are varying degrees and states of consciousness. How do we measure and quantify these nuances? As you can see, measuring consciousness is a monumental task that spans across disciplines, from neuroscience to philosophy. But by exploring these intersections, and by including consciousness in models like the energy equation, we might just inch closer to unraveling the mysteries of the conscious mind. One proposed idea is to use what we can measure, brain activity, and attempt to correlate it with states of consciousness. For example, brainwave patterns from an EEG could be categorized into different states like alertness, drowsiness, deep sleep, and so on. Another approach could be creating a spectrum of consciousness, where different states and experiences are placed on a continuum, from minimally conscious states to highly complex, self-reflective consciousness. Artificial intelligence might also come to the rescue. Machine learning algorithms could potentially be trained on vast data sets of brain activity and subjective reports, learning to predict conscious states based on neural data. But what about the qualitative aspects of consciousness? Things like emotions, sensations, or inner experiences. We might need a toolbox approach, using a combination of neuroscience, psychology, and computational methods to create multidimensional models of consciousness. It's also possible that new ways of quantifying consciousness may emerge from unexpected disciplines. It's an evolving field, and Brandon's energy equation could very well be at the forefront of this evolution. In summary, quantifying consciousness for the energy equation is likely to require a dynamic, multifaceted approach. It's an exciting prospect that could not only help in understanding the enigmatic nature of consciousness, but also unravel the deep connection it shares with the very fabric of the universe. In this segment, we're going to get into the fascinating implications of including consciousness in understanding physical phenomena through Brandon's energy equation. Traditionally, physics has treated the universe as a giant machine, operating under fixed laws, independent of consciousness. But what if consciousness isn't just a passive observer? What if it's an active player in the unfolding of physical phenomena? Let's start with the observer effect in quantum mechanics. The very act of observation seems to affect the behavior of particles. Could consciousness play a role in this? Brandon's energy equation suggests that consciousness might not only interact with, but also shape the underlying fabric of reality. Think about the famous double-slit experiment, where particles can behave both as waves and particles. Could the presence of consciousness influence this duality? And it doesn't end with tiny particles. The energy equation proposes that consciousness could have large-scale effects. Could collective consciousness, for example, have some influence on global or even cosmic events? This brings us to the mind-boggling idea of a conscious universe. A universe where consciousness is a fundamental aspect, much like space, time, and matter. And if consciousness is woven into the fabric of the universe, what does this mean for our interconnectedness? Are we, through our consciousness, deeply intertwined with the cosmos? This paradigm shift opens up new pathways for scientific discovery. It challenges the traditional boundaries between physics, neuroscience, and philosophy. And more importantly, it invites us to reconsider our place in the cosmos. As we explore the energy equation further, let's keep our minds open to the immense possibilities and profound implications of including consciousness in our understanding of physical phenomena. The universe may be more alive and connected than we ever imagined. In this segment, we're going to see how integrating consciousness into the energy equation challenges traditional views in science. This is where things get even more exciting. For centuries, science, especially physics, has often been seen as an objective study of the natural world. The observer was considered separate from what was being observed. But what happens when the observer, through consciousness, becomes part of the equation? Suddenly, the lines start to blur. Traditional science, particularly since the time of Descartes, operated under the notion of dualism, that the mind and matter are separate. Now, let's think about the implications of including consciousness in the energy equation. It suggests that mind and matter may not be as separate as we thought. Instead, they might be deeply intertwined. Imagine a reality where consciousness is not just a byproduct, but an integral component of the universe's fabric. This idea challenges some fundamental assumptions in traditional science. For instance, first, it breaks down the wall between the observer and the observed. It suggests that the very act of observation could be an interaction between consciousness and the physical world. Secondly, it calls for a reevaluation of what we consider as objective. If consciousness is part of the energy equation, can anything be truly objective? Or is everything tinged with the subjective nature of consciousness? And here's another mind-bender. If consciousness influences physical reality, could it have played a role in the evolution of the universe, or even life as we know it? These questions don't have easy answers. But what's clear is that incorporating consciousness into the energy equation is shaking the foundations of traditional scientific thought. It's creating a nexus where physics, neuroscience, and philosophy come together, forging a new paradigm. This is not just a scientific revolution, it's an invitation to look at the universe and ourselves in a profoundly different light. As we peel back the layers of reality through the lens of the energy equation, we might find that we are more deeply connected to the cosmos than we could ever have imagined. We've already discussed the role consciousness plays in the energy equation, but now let's look at some real-life examples and hypothetical scenarios to really get a grasp of this concept. Let's start with meditation. Many people meditate to achieve a state of mindfulness or heightened awareness. Some studies have shown that when people meditate, they can alter their brainwaves and even influence their surroundings. Now, through the lens of the energy equation with consciousness as a parameter, we could interpret this as the conscious mind actively engaging with and affecting the energy in and around the body. This gives us a tangible example of how consciousness interacts with physical energy. Let's jump into a bit of quantum mechanics, specifically the double-slit experiment. It's one of the most mind-boggling experiments that suggests that particles can behave both as particles and waves. Some interpretations suggest that the very act of observing the particles causes them to decide how to behave. Now imagine incorporating consciousness into this equation. Could it be that our consciousness is directly affecting the behavior of these particles? Next, let's consider the famous thought experiment, Schrödinger's cat. It is a hypothetical scenario where a cat in a box is both alive and dead until someone observes it. By applying the energy equation with consciousness as a parameter, one might hypothesize that it's the consciousness of the observer that collapses the superposition, resulting in the cat being either alive or dead. This puts consciousness at the center of how reality takes shape. Lastly, think about a busy place, like a train station or a mall. Each person in those places has different thoughts, emotions, and intentions. Through the energy equation, we could conceptualize that every individual's consciousness is interacting with and affecting the energy in that space. This could lead to complex energy dynamics, which could, in turn, affect the experiences and decisions of individuals within that space. All these examples and scenarios give us a glimpse of the intricate tapestry that weaves consciousness with physical reality through the energy equation. This opens up a myriad of questions and possibilities. As we push the boundaries of our understanding, who knows what wonders we might uncover? So far, we've dived into the many facets of consciousness and how it intertwines with the energy equation. In this segment, we're going to delve deeper into how consciousness can potentially affect energy in various contexts. Let's begin with a simple example. Imagine focusing your thoughts intently on a light bulb. Although we can't make it light up just by thinking about it, the energy of your focused attention is still something to consider. When we talk about consciousness affecting energy, we need to expand our understanding beyond the physical. What if our thoughts and emotions, components of our consciousness, can affect energies in more subtle or even quantum realms? In the context of neuroscience, it's known that the brain generates electrical activity. This electrical activity, which is a form of energy, is influenced by our thoughts, emotions, and states of consciousness. Brandon's energy equation suggests that consciousness could have a direct role in modulating these energy patterns in the brain. Now, let's expand this beyond an individual. In interpersonal relationships, the emotions and thoughts, which are forms of conscious experience, can be seen as types of energy that affect how people interact. For instance, have you ever noticed that someone's mood can affect your own? This could be an example of consciousness influencing energy on a social level. Now, let's take this on a much larger scale: the environment and the Earth itself. Imagine the collective consciousness of humanity and its potential impact on the energies of the Earth's ecosystem. Some researchers have speculated that large-scale human activities and collective states of consciousness could even influence global events or natural phenomena. While this is highly speculative, it's a thought-provoking possibility. On a quantum level, as we discussed earlier, the act of observation, which involves consciousness, seems to affect the state of particles. This suggests that consciousness might play a role in the fundamental workings of the universe. By considering consciousness as a part of the energy equation, we are challenged to reevaluate not just scientific concepts, but also our understanding of the interconnectedness of life, nature, and the cosmos. The potential is vast and honestly awe-inspiring. I'd like to leave you with this thought. What if our collective consciousness could be harnessed for positive change on both a personal and global scale? What kind of world could we create? The inclusion of consciousness in the energy equation opens doors to endless questions and explorations. Before we wrap up today's episode, I want to take a moment to engage with all of you amazing viewers out there. I'd like you to consider any examples or experiences you might have encountered in your own lives where consciousness might have played a role in energy dynamics. Whether it's a personal story, a moment that changed your perspective, or just a thought that you'd like to share, I encourage you to dive into your creativity and think about how the interplay between consciousness and energy might have manifested in your life. We'd love to hear from you, so please share your stories and thoughts on social media using the hashtag #RLFlow. Remember, this is not just about science in isolation. It's about understanding the world we live in and how our own consciousness can be a driving force in it. Your insights and experiences are valuable contributions to this exploration. Through #RLFlow, let's create a space for open dialogue, collaboration, and discovery. Your participation could be the spark that ignites a whole new avenue of inquiry or understanding. So, don't hold back. Share, explore, and engage with the #RLFlow community. Thank you so much for tuning in. I look forward to reading your posts, and I can't wait to see what incredible insights and stories you all have to share. All right, folks, what an adventure we've been on today, delving into the intricate web of consciousness and how it intertwines with energy in the energy equation. We've explored various definitions of consciousness, delved into how and why consciousness is incorporated into the energy equation, and discussed current methods and challenges in measuring consciousness. We've also seen how this integration of consciousness challenges traditional views in science and could revolutionize our understanding of physical phenomena. This is only just the beginning. Our journey through the energy equation is going to take us to even more incredible and mind-bending places. In our next episode, titled Emotions as Energy, we'll be discussing how emotions are quantified and incorporated into the energy equation, and we'll explore the fascinating implications and applications of emotional energy in physical systems. Can you imagine emotions as a form of energy affecting the world around us? This is going to be epic. Keep that curiosity and thirst for knowledge burning, my fellow explorers. The mysteries of the universe are endless, and it's up to us to keep asking questions, to keep probing, and to keep discovering. A huge thank you to all of you for watching and being a part of this amazing journey. And a special shout out to everyone who's going to share their thoughts and stories using the RLFlow hashtag. Until next time, this is Bella, signing off. Stay curious and stay awesome, my friends.